morning and welcome into the show. It is Daniel Workman coming to you live from the Dream Agile Sports Studios. It is 8 a.m. on the East Coast, 5 a.m. out in the West Coast, but it is 7 a.m. in Chicago. And why do I bring up Chicago? Why do I bring up Chicago? Well, that is where U.S. Soccer's headquarters are located, sometimes referred to as U.S. Soccer House. And after news broke yesterday concerning comments made and questioning and a line of arguments made by U.S. Soccer's lawyers in the women's equal pay case came out, it is, I want to say it's unbelievable. I want to say it's disappointing. But the truth is, I sat in a board meeting about a month ago in Nashville, Tennessee, when the Court of Arbitration in Sport case was discussed, and there was so much glee over winning that case that I am not surprised at this line of questioning and some of the comments that were used so far in this case. I told someone afterwards that that to me it was a posture and mentality of winning. Lawyers are competitive too. They want to win. They have a job to do, and that is to win for their client. When I saw what I observed in that board meeting, what I took in was, someone that was excited about winning. The problem that I have is that the client, in the case of this U.S. women's national team equal pay situation, the federation itself is okay with winning at all costs. And if you're wondering why I'm saying this and what in the world am I talking about, this is from BuzzFeed. U.S. Soccer doesn't want to give the women's team equal pay because the men have, quote, more responsibility. This is by Molly Hensley Clancy, posted yesterday. Embroiled in a lawsuit over equal pay, lawyers for the U.S. women's national team employer argued in a court filing Monday that women athletes are less skilled, work less demanding jobs than their male counterparts. The filing was part of U.S. Soccer's attempt to prove that it is not discriminated against a World Cup champion team based on their gender. Court documents filed in the equal pay trial, which captivated the country last summer after the U.S. women's national team won its fourth World Cup title in France, show U.S. soccer lawyers arguing that under the Equal Pay Act, quote, the job of a men's national team player carries more responsibility within U.S. soccer than the job of a women's national team player. U.S. Soccer also pointed to biological differences in, quote, indisputable science, end quote, to argue that women should be paid less because the men's team, quote, requires a higher level of skill, end quote, than the women's team. The Federation's lawyers grilled women's national team stars like Carly Lloyd and Alex Morgan over the fact that they were not as strong or fast as players on the men's team. So the lawyers are using bigger, faster, stronger as our defense. That is just so classic U.S. soccer. Do you think that the team could be competitive against the senior men's national team? A U.S. soccer lawyer asked Lloyd, according to documents filed last month. I'm not sure, Lloyd said. Shall we fight it out to see who wins and then we get paid more? As U.S. Soccer built its case, a lawyer for the organization asked Morgan, do you think it requires more skill to play for the U.S. men's national team than the U.S. women's national team? No, Morgan replied. It's a different skill. That U.S. men's team players often face openly hostile fans at their own home games, U.S. Soccer argued, was also evidence that men work a different, more demanding job than women. The U.S. men's opponents, like Mexico, sometimes attract more supporters to games played on U.S. soil than the U.S. men do, especially in the wake of the men's failure to qualify for the 2018 World Cup. With a jury trial looming in May, the gulf between the U.S. women's national team and its employer appears wider than ever. The U.S. women are asking for some $67 million in back pay for what they claim is U.S. soccer's violation of the Equal Pay Act. A letter released this week from U.S. Soccer President Carlos Cordero claimed that his organization had offered an equal pay structure with the men's national team, which the women had rejected. But U.S. women's national team lawyers countered that the, quote, equal pay offer was based on a contract the men's team had negotiated 9 years ago in 2011, in which it is itself in the midst of renegotiating. These are the inconvenient facts that the Federation often leaves out. This is just so infuriating. FIFA, the worldwide governing body of the sport, pays much larger chunks of prize money for the men's World Cup than the women's. In their suit, the women have argued that U.S. Soccer should not pay them less because of FIFA's prize structure. But U.S. Soccer has said that matching the bonus paid out by FIFA to men's winners would cause the organization financial harm. Angering some women's team players, Cordero released his letter on the eve of one of the national team's biggest games played on U.S. soil, a rematch of the World Cup match that was played last summer against Spain in front of a sold-out crowd in New Jersey. The game is part of the She Believes Cup, an elite women's tournament hosted by U.S. Soccer around the International Women's Day that features young girls as, quote, She Believes heroes. I mean, the timing of it on the eve of not only a game, but in this tournament and on the eve of International Women's Day, Megan Rapinoe told reporters. I guess if that's how you want to celebrate International Women's Day and show support for not only your players, but future players and girls all over the place, that's one way to do it. Let me just say that this behavior and mentality and philosophy by the Federation has been ongoing for a very long time. It is now coming to light in the public eye for the first time in a real way, but this is not new. And the women's national team players have dealt with this for a very long time. This is why they are fighting this fight. And coming out with stupid letters and disparaging letters and letters that are disingenuous in citing of facts and thinking that is going to somehow win the day. I mean, this is the delusion of U.S. soccer. They live in such an insulated bubble that they believe that they can conduct themselves this way without repercussions. It is absurd. Absurd. The comments, the questions. I mean, if you want to make an argument about money, if you want to say that the men's national team brings in more money and therefore they should get paid more, that's one thing. But to sit here and go through this line of questioning, acting the way that these lawyers were acting, they're doing it after having meetings with the board. How do we want to go about this? And how do the women on the board stand by this line of questioning and this behavior? It is absurd to the nth degree. I'm glad this behavior is getting exposed, and I am glad that the women's national team and Hope Solo, who started before even the women's national team, I'm glad that all of these parties are pushing forward on this issue, and they should keep pushing forward. And I hope the Athlete Council, who voted in Carlos Cordero, they buddied up with this guy in the 2018 election and put him in office. I hope they pay close attention to what's going on right now and have a good rethink in 2022, because looking at where we are, the only way things are going to change is for the athletes, for the adult council and the youth councils to stand up and say enough is enough. I'm hoping for this. I am rooting for this. There are great people in every one of those councils. In the Athlete Council, there are great people. In the Youth Council, there are great people in the Adult Amateur Council. The past is a past. We have to let that go and move on. What we have to do is look at the present and the future and where we are going. And my hope is coming up on 2022 that those three councils come together and say enough is enough. We need to take U.S. soccer in a different direction. That's what I'm hoping for. That's what we need in this country so desperately, because this kind of behavior that I witnessed at the AGM in Nashville about the Court of Arbitration and Sport case, and now this behavior in line of questioning going on at the moment in this U.S. Women's National Team case is indicative of a worldview, a philosophy that should not stand, should not be allowed. It's ridiculous. And so I hope that going forward that we make changes, because this kind of stuff is going to continue no matter what happens in this case. And that's the ultimate lesson we need to learn. That even if the women's national team, and I stand with this women's national team, I stand with Hope Solo, even if they're victorious, changes still need to happen at the board level and at the leadership level within U.S. Soccer to get this thing righted, because this is unacceptable. It should not be tolerated by any member of the federation. It is an embarrassment to our country and an embarrassment to all of U.S. Soccer. Our sponsor this half hour is Ductic Brand, DUKTIG brand. Use promo code DWShow when you place your order, and you'll get 10% off at ducticbrand.com. We'll be right back after this. to the show. Thanks for tuning in today. And we are joined today by William Wilson. He is a soccer coach. You may know him as Coach Willie. And Will, welcome to the show. Thanks so much for joining us today. How are you?
How are you doing?
I'm doing well. It's much better if we unmute your mic, and so now we can hear you good and loud. That always helps whenever we're doing an interview. So William, Will, as I guess we'll go with today. Will, where did you first really decide that you love the game and that you wanted to stay involved in the game, even from a coaching standpoint? When did that kind of love affair, anybody can be a supporter and root for a team and be dedicated to a team, but to really want to go beyond that level to into kind of pondering, tactics and technique and coaching, etc. At what point did that, connect for you?
Well, I don't believe that the truth is going to make me look very good here. Essentially, I've been a fan, been obsessed with the game since I was a kid, and I went to a private school, very, very academic, and my best subjects were sport and music. I then went to a high school which was one of the worst in the county, and I kind of did that deliberately to get away from that environment that I'd been brought up in through the private school. And I had no idea what I want to do for a career. I just knew that I loved football, and it was pretty much all I did and all I thought about. And it was around then that we started having to think about our next move, our career, our further education. And they took us to loads of university fairs. And essentially what I did was I picked up a load of different prospectuses from the different universities, and I chucked them in my bag. At the end of the day, I went home and threw my bag on the floor. I said, we had to go out today and look at different universities, just to make it look like I was actually having any considerate thought about my future choices, even though I wasn't. And my mum goes through my bag, gets out the prospectuses, and after a little while of reading them, she says, "Oh, do you know that Southampton Solent, which is the university at the right, do you know they do a course in football studies?" I thought, what? Yeah, and we looked at it and went into detail and thought, 3 years without having to do a proper job, 3 years of just learning more about football. Absolutely, I'll go ahead and do that. And that's what got me into it. That's what let me know that you can actually be a coach and make a career out of the game other than just playing it. And from that, we learned so many different aspects of it. Opened my mind completely to everything football. And from there, that's when I got on the coaching badges, and that's when I started to coach teams and actually work within the game. But had I not gone to the university fairs, had I not pretended to care about my future, and had my mum not gone through my bag, I would not be on this career path.
So your mom is your hero, obviously. You must have a shrine of her in your house, as she was the one who really connected the dots for you, right?
Yeah, pretty much. It was. I had honestly no idea what I was going to do, and I'm quite cynical, and nothing appealed to me. And I've always looked at people stuck in offices and felt so grateful that I get to wear shorts and kick a ball and dress like a child in my tracksuits and football shirts every day. I'm so thankful for that. So my mum was a huge influence on that, and particularly from a point of view of values. And she's always taught me to stand up for the little guy and to fight for those who can't fight for themselves. And I'd also have to give a lot of credit to my dad as well, because they're both absolutely fantastic. Because my dad, for a few years when I was a kid, he was the coach of my team. And he did it because no one else wanted to, and he was just trying to be helpful. And he made it so much fun through his personality and through essentially his values. I mean, everyone else that we had up until that point, football is it's still fun, I think, sometimes in spite of who you have. I mean, you can have a drill sergeant, real mean coach who's just not a very nice person. You can still enjoy football if you love the game. But my dad made everyone enjoy it because of who he is. And even years later, as an adult, I'd still bump into some of the guys I played with as a kid. I don't care how I am. First question and the only question is, well, how's your dad? And so to try and be like that and try and put some of that into what I do with the kids and to make the experience about them, make the experience fun for them. I mean, that really is at the core of what I do. A lot of that is thanks to him.
Now, growing up in England and playing, what kind of football style wise did you grow up playing, and how did that kind of influence what kind of coach or style of play you wanted to coach when you got into coaching?
Simply, it taught me what not to do. I developed a lot quicker physically than other kids. I mean, at age 14, I was 6 foot tall with shoulders, and it was always easy for me to win the ball. And I naturally had a much bigger, longer kick than everyone. So I was every youth coach's dream in England. And the instructions were, if it moves, kick it. If it doesn't move, kick it until it does. And they would encourage me to be very physical, aggressive, violent. And then when I got the ball, just shell it 60 yards up the field. Because even as a 10-year-old, I could launch the ball half of an 11v11 pitch. And so I was never taught to control the ball, find a pass, and to actually think and play with any kind of skill or intelligence. And so as a coach, those are the things that I value, because I see how essentially shortchanged I was growing up. And what kind of course corrected that slightly was at 16, I started to play 5v5 indoor with a load of friends. And now suddenly I had no time on the ball. We couldn't kick the ball overhead height. And if you tried to smash it out for a clearance, it would hit a wall and come back into play. So all of my, all of what I did as a kid now no longer worked. So I actually had to play short passes, occasionally dribble. And I thought, wow, why did no one teach me this when I was a kid? And essentially because that's what we value as English people. It's just fighting in the mud, and the big kid kicks it to the fast kid. You do it 60 times a game, and eventually one of you is going to score more goals than the other. The only difference between how we played compared to how, in my experience, most American kids play is that we played in mud and they play on plastic grass, so they're not rolling around like pigs in the mud. But everything else is the same concept. Big kid kicks it, the fast kid, repeat, score, win, and no one actually learns in that process. And I also think that something that really benefited me was the change in mindset in the FA kind of coincided with when I started getting into football. So England weren't really very successful, and I think most people argue they probably still aren't, on the international stage and also at developing players. And the cynics like me could see it for quite a while. And then around about 2008, England didn't qualify for the Euros. They lost at home to Croatia. And most of us can still remember where we were when we saw McLaren with his umbrella. 2006 World Cup, underperformed. 2010 World Cup, underperformed. And again, a couple of tournaments after that, just kept underperforming. And people started to wake up and go, maybe we're not as good as we think we are. Why could that be? And looking at countries like France, Spain, Germany, Brazil, seeing the type of players they created and thinking, well, why don't we do that? And to their credit, the FA were a little bit ahead of that. And they revolutionized the coaching and the youth development and particularly the best courses I've ever done were the youth awards, the youth modules, and then the youth award. It essentially makes you're a teacher. Your subject is football, but you are a teacher, and you're no longer the instructor. It's no longer I know everything, bow down to me and listen to what I say. It's how can we help get the best out of the kids, and how can we best prepare them for the future game? Because we don't know what it'll be like in 5, 10, 15 years, but we have to make players that are intelligent and adaptable. And because I started getting coaching around that time, I was taught to think in that way. And I was very fortunate to do that. I think if I got into coaching a few years earlier, I might still be quite outdated and behind the times in how I view the game. So again, a good stroke of fortune for me there.
So you let's fast forward a little bit. You're coaching in the States, I believe, and at this time, and you were coaching a girls team. And I was reading a tweet thread. I believe this is a U.S. team that you were coaching, and yes. And you had a goalkeeper you'd been working with for a while. Tell us that story that you walked through a little bit on Twitter in this thread. But I think it's a fascinating story and really a microcosm of where the state of the game is in youth soccer, and there's so many that will profess that they're into development or teaching players to play the right way, or possession or positional play, but then you watch training sessions, you watch their matches, you hear them speak, and the two don't necessarily line up. And your tweet thread, I feel like, really kind of gave us a glimpse into some of that story that plays out over and over across this country. So kind of walk us through, you had been working with a goalkeeper, what age, and kind of what were you trying to instill in her as a keeper, in how she played, the style that she played, and then juxtapose that with the opponent, and then kind of walk us through what happened in that match.
Sure. So this was 2 years ago. I was coaching in St. Louis, and the girls were I think around U12 playing 9v9. So it was the year before they went to 11v11. And so at the start of the season, I'd inherited what was quite a talented team. And we had been brought in to implement a curriculum and a methodology. And not everyone at the club was doing that, but that's a whole different issue. I was doing it with my team. And not only were the kids really enthusiastic and some very, very good players in there. But the goalkeeper was quite developed for her age. So while the rest of them, there are quite a lot of short girls in there. So some of them looked about 9, 10 or 11. She looked about 15. And I remember the first training session I had with her, with that team, her mum was the parent manager, and I'm stood there talking to them. And I think, when's this girl going to go away and go to her own practice? Because I thought she was someone's older sister, but no, she was one of the players on that team. So part of our methodology was that the goalkeeper needed to be like a sweeper keeper and to be fantastic at their distribution, and the model being like Manuel Neuer. And so it takes a long time to get them to come out of their comfort zone. And the way I always phrase it with players when I'm asked to do something risky that they haven't done before is, if I'm telling you to play like this and you make a mistake playing my way, then it's my fault and not yours. And because they're always worried about if they play high out of their goal, they're worried about they're going to get chipped. So many months down the line, we're playing in this game, and by now she's really taken to her role fantastic. I mean, the parents having heart attacks every time she charges out to clear a loose ball, every time they play back to her under pressure. But by and large, they get what the point is, because earlier on in the season, she kept launching the ball forward from drop kicks and would lose possession, and they'd all shout, "Oh, good kick, well done." I had to get them to one side and say, look, if she boots it and it comes down to one of their players, that's not a good kick. And then they'll, oh yeah, suppose that's a good point. And so with a bit of the parent education and reinforcing some of these elements, it essentially got some of the patience required to get this out of it. And her teammates bought into this completely. They were fully on board with what we were doing. So in this game, we go a goal down. I mean, they have a shot from outside the box and it bounces over our arm. We can't really penetrate their back line, but we're playing well. But the main point is her. So she is receiving the ball outside of her box. She's switching play. She's got distribution with both feet, both hands, and is making great choices. The risk and reward, knowing when to play direct, when to play patient, how to support, and it's a real joy to watch. And so we get a goal back, and the second half, being 1-1, I think it might have been our left defender played the ball back to her. She's outside the box. She looks up, can't find anyone ahead, so plays out to the right. Right defender is then under pressure, plays back to our goalie. Our goalie then plays it back to the left defender. And again, she can't play forward, so it goes back to the goalie. Now, the goalie looked up and saw someone free out on the right wing. And so she decided to try and ping like a 30, 40-yard diagonal with her weaker foot. Unfortunately, she completely scuffed it, and the ball trickled along the ground to their striker, who then went and put the ball into the empty net. But that didn't dissuade her from still playing like that throughout the rest of the game. When can she throw? When can she receive? When does she need to try and hit one over the top? When does she need to play the feet? And to contrast that, at the other end of the pitch, their goalkeeper never left the 6-yard box. So if we were to boot one over the top, we'd have that 30 yards of space where the goalkeeper would be kind of paralyzed on our line. She also never took any of the goal kicks. That was done by a defender whose instruction was just to smash it. And then when their goalkeeper did have the ball in her hands, it would be the same thing every time. It'd be throw it up in the air and then perform some kind of ballet type drop kick where the ball would go more vertical than it would go long up the field. And so we lost the game 2-1. And at the end of the game, during all the handshakes, their coach, he quite slyly thinks that no one's paying attention. He puts his arm around my goalkeeper, tells her how great she did, and that she should come and play for his team. So she told me that right away. And I thought, just the pure cheek of this, you owe it to your players as a coach to develop them. I mean, if you like what my goalkeeper does, then teach your goalkeeper to do it. But instead, his game plan, because there's two of them, their game plan was to limit the amount of mistakes you can make and just get the ball as far away from the goal as possible. So I know that my type of goalkeeper would not do well in his team, but he wants the finished product. He wants that. He doesn't want to put in the hours of work, the conceding stupid goals and the mistakes. They don't want to do that. And that's why I feel that most coaches that work within the youth game in the United States don't deserve the title coach, because they're recruiters, they're scouts. I mean, we can all look at a bunch of players playing and pick out the best 2 or 3, but can we look at a group of players playing and pick out the ones with the most potential? That's very hard to do. And how many coaches have the patience to work with a player like that? So much of it is about, we have to win now. And I put that down to ego, and also put it down to profit margins as well, because if you win games, you get more players come out to your trials, and therefore you can pick the better ones, make your team better, you can win more, your club generates more money, and sometimes if you're a coach, you might get a cut of that. And I think, what a complete disservice that is to your players. They are in your duty of care. You have to look after them. You have to do the best by them. And that includes not getting rid of them whenever someone better comes along. Work with your goalkeeper. Don't try and steal mine. But that, in my experience, is how a lot of it works.
It is how a lot of it works. And speaking of how a lot of it works, you have a post on your blog about tournament-itis. And I just want to read the kind of intro to this post, because I I think it's a good setup for this discussion. You said there are plenty of takes on tournaments out there, all echoing the same sentiments. My take will be along the same lines, with my only contribution to the discourse being to call them money-hungry wankers that put profit over child development. Prior to working in the job I'm about to leave, the American soccer tournament was the stuff of legend. Friends and colleagues would regale stories about amazing facilities, exotic locations, luxury hotels, and the adventures involved with traveling with your team. It's almost like you're a real team. So much of American youth soccer is make-believe. Our kids play at expensive facilities. They travel the country like they are pros making a living. They wear expensive brand name kits, have their highlights plastered all over social media, and have clipboard throwing coaches that treat every game like they are in the Premier League. It's time to wake up. So, in terms of your experience in kind of the tournament stuff, in this motivation for this post in tournamentitis, what are some things that you see that are, from the kids' perspective, that they would rather be a part of, or what are some changes you would like to see in your observations of your players that you think would be better in terms of creating an environment for development versus, as you called them, money-hungry wankers?
Yeah, well, we see that a lot of these clubs. I mean, they make huge profits off of hosting their tournaments, and that's where they get a lot of their revenue from. And that then gets reinvested back into what I call the shiny objects, like their facilities and stuff like that. When I think, actually, no, make your fees cheaper so that you can get more players playing, or educate your coaches so that your players can get a better experience. For me, as a kid, I mean, it's just so much fun, isn't it? You go away for a couple of days with your mates. You stay in a hotel. You get to eat a lot of junk food. You get to play in the pool. You get to have 3 or 4 games in a different location. And for them, it's brilliant, but they don't quite get the cost and the sacrifice associated with it. And when it comes to the parents, I mean, their experience of it is, for a lot of them, it's treated like a mini vacation, because they're having to give up time off work to get there. And in many things, we lower ourselves to the lowest common denominator. But I think when it comes to tournaments, often everyone has to raise themselves. So, I don't know, on average, you might get half of the team's parents are fairly well off and can afford. One of them can take the time off and they can afford all the money for the fancy hotel. We're going to stay at a Hilton or a Hampton or a Marriott. And they can do that, whereas the rest of them can't. But because they don't want their kid to miss out, they scrape the money from somewhere. And it comes at quite a significant cost to them. And you think they're already paying thousands anyway to be part of youth soccer. And I just think that we're lying to people when we say that tournaments are about development, because they're not really. Whether you win or lose a tournament is mostly based on who you get in your bracket. And I've had it where my team's been the best team and we've just walked every game. So that was a pointless experience, because it was, we weren't challenged. And I've also had it when my team was by far the worst and we got slapped in every game. So again, what was the point in being there? And the point essentially is, it's fun. It's real good fun. And socially, it's brilliant in the opportunity to bond. And as a coach, everyone treats you fantastic. I mean, we get to stay in a nice hotel for free and everyone pays for your meals. And it's just great, but it's not making players better, because 90% of the soccer experience from coast to coast is just the same old nonsense. That the teams don't really play any differently regardless of where you go. So we could leave St. Louis and drive 6 hours to a different state, and the names might change, the uniforms might change, but we're facing the exact same tactical and technical problems that we had in St. Louis. So where's our diversity of challenge? Now, if it comes to more higher-end tournaments, then perhaps there's an argument to be made that we have to go far away because there's not enough good teams in our area. So the only way we get a challenge is to drive or to get on a plane. And where I'm not necessarily disputing that, I do think it's sad that we can't make better players, better teams, better infrastructure in our own areas so that people feel like they have to go far away. Now, even so, if we were to go to a high-level tournament, you think maybe these players actually have a chance of making it in the game, then what good is it to play 2 games in a day for their rest and recovery? I mean, particularly if you're going to go to one of those showcases, which I think the name showcase, it's a bit of a rip-off. But if you're going to go to one of them and supposedly get looked at by scouts, and you've already played, 2-3 games, you're knackered. The scout looking at you might think, oh, this player's got no energy, this player's got no speed, this player doesn't get in the right position. Yeah, because they're bloody tired. I mean, they're playing so many games in a short space of time. They can't truly show who they are. And if we want to compete, then at a high level, what would you do? You'd get tape of the opposition. You'd know their strengths and weaknesses, and you'd train in a way to try and defeat that. But that's not how we do it. We go away to some city and play against 3 random opponents that we don't know anything about, and we try and figure it out in the game. But that's not what you do at high level. So I think so much of the experience is a sham. And what personally I would do, from talking to a lot of parents, they're quite on board with this, is because we're saying that most of the benefit is purely because it's fun and it's great socially. Well, let's just play a few games locally and have a slumber party. You can go bowling, do laser tag, or something like that. Go to Cheesecake Factory. Everyone has great food, and it doesn't come at the cost of $600 as a minimum for a family to go. I mean, someone who's got a big living room, get all the kids over there for the night in their sleeping bags, watch movies, and you'll get the same effect. Parents can be outside having a barbecue, getting drunk like they like to do on tournaments, and you'd still come away with the same feelings as if you were to drive 5 hours, because you still spent that time bonding, you still spent that time relaxing and getting to know each other. And it hasn't come at such a great cost, and no one has tried to pull the wool over your eyes and say, but it's about development. If you don't go to this tournament, your kids won't be very good. If you don't go to this showcase, the college scouts won't be able to see how good your players are. And for me, so much of it is done just to make a few people or a few clubs richer. And we're playing on that fear of missing out. We're playing on that fear of inadequacy. And we go to as many tournaments as you like, but realize that it's because it's fun. That's why you want to go. The parents want to get drunk and sit around the fire, talking nonsense. The kids want to run around the hotel, jumping in pools and playing pranks on people. Do that. That's fun. But say it's fun. Don't say it's development. Don't say it's a high-level tournament that's going to make your players better. Don't say that if you don't go, your kids aren't going to develop or progress, because that's what gets people to fork out the cash that they don't have to go to these things. And I have so many problems with this on a moral level. I think we're doing them all a disservice.
Yeah, I agree. And, I think people know that travel youth sports in America are big business, and that, they cost a lot of money. And I know some people are still sticker shocked when they actually learn how much these families are forking out. And later in that article that you posted, the blog that you posted, you said that youth sports is annually a $17 billion economy, $1 billion business. The NFL is only worth $15 billion. There's a lot of money. I mean, and you look at where things are and the way things are postured. U.S. Soccer is just as guilty. The federation goes around using buzzwords like, world class when it comes to their development academy. And, there's no world class going on, except for maybe, as you mentioned, glitzy, nice facilities, but not necessarily, the development side. You can make a pretty sound argument, I think, that the development is second rate. It's certainly not world class. Speaking of development, something else I want to get in with you is to kind of pick your brain about your thoughts on development. If you were in charge of a federation, whether it's U.S. soccer or some tiny island country out in the Pacific, and they said, "Hey, we want you to kind of design from scratch the way we do football." What are your thoughts on where, let's say, you've got experience in the U.S. game, in the American game, where would you juxtapose what you see in the American game versus some of your ideas about how to do this from scratch?
Well, this is a dream of mine, so I fantasize about this quite a lot. But essentially, I think people say that you can't import a culture. So you look at who's doing well currently around the world, and you think, well, France or Spain, Croatia, whoever it might be at that time. You think, well, let's just do what they do. And I get why you can't implement that completely. But I do believe you can take some of the ideas and find a way to put it into what you do. So I think that a lot of countries go too big too soon when it comes to fields and team sizes. So if it was down to me, as a rule of thumb, I would go age -4. So I think 11-year-olds should still be playing 77. And I like some of the things that they do in Belgium, where they do the 1v1, the 2v2 at a really young age. Then contrast that to some of the things I've seen here in Mexico. A few years ago, I was watching a bunch of 8-year-olds play 11v11 on a full-size pitch. And I think this is just insane. And one team got a free kick, and the coach is screaming at everyone, move up, and then screaming at the player on the ball to smash it long. Of course, he's only 8 years old. He can't kick it more than 10 yards. So the other team then intercept it, and then the swarm of players runs 60 yards down the other end of the pitch, and they still only barely cross the halfway line because they're just so misguided. Like we see what the adults do and think, well, if we want our kids to be good at that, we have to do that. But we got to put it in a way which is more appropriate for them, for their levels of development, for their understanding, and mainly for their physicality. One of the best quotes I ever saw was in the FA boot room years ago. They did a study on this, and they were asking players, how do you feel? And you might have seen some of the videos that the FA have done, and I think even Canadian hockey did it as well, where they make adults play on a massive pitch that would be the dimensions relative to kids. And this little boy about 11 years old is saying, why do I have to defend the same size goal as Petr Cech? And what we see regularly when you've got 4 or 5 foot tall goalkeeper and an 8 foot goal is all you have to do to score is kick it high. So then get your biggest, strongest kid on the ball, and they take a shot like a sand wedge in golf, and they're essentially scuffing their foot under the ball to get air on it, and it doesn't really go in the corner. It's not struck with any precision or power, but it's just high, and you see this little kid with little arms flapping underneath the ball as it goes into the net from 30 yards out. Parents and coaches go crazy, and that positively reinforces doing that. Now, in a few years' time, when the goalkeeper is able to touch the crossbar, those shots no longer work. But the kid taking those shots has been conditioned for years to shoot like that. So when they get to the adult game, they can't finish to save their lives. I mean, they're terrible. As we say in England, you can't score in a brothel. And we've done that to them by the constraints that we put on the game. So I listed in that article what I would do at each age in terms of ball size, half length. That's another thing. One thing I found it in England in the league, it was the JPL. We play under 13, 80-minute games in 20-minute periods. So that means you get a lot more time to have discussion and intervention with your kids. And because in my experience in the American game, there's so many coaches that treat substitutions like ice hockey. I do 6 players on, and there's one club near us in St. Louis that was doing it every 3 minutes. We were going crazy. We count it on our watch. We time every 3 minutes they'd put on 4, 5, 6 players. And so if we were to do it something like that in thirds or quarters, then coaches get just a bit more time to go over things with their kids. I mean, how many times you've been behind in a game after 10, 15 minutes? You think, oh, half time is so long away. How can we correct this? How can we have that discussion? How can we implement some things? So you would get in quarters about one before the start of each game, one at the end of each game, and then the 3 breaks in between. So that's essentially 5 team talks, 5 ways where you can, 5 opportunities for you to paint pictures and go over things with your players and say what's working, what's not working, go through that reflective process, and then try and affect what's going on in the match. So I definitely implement that. I would also, at the younger ages, use more festival type things where you turn up to a neutral venue and you play 2, 3, 4 games in a morning. Because then youth football is so random at times that the score lines are often really quite odd. And let's say you get beat 10-2. Imagine if you've got another 2 games directly after that. You can bounce back. You can have another go. You can try and implement something. Because not every challenge is appropriate simply because kids are odd. They can wake up on the wrong side of the bed and be completely different personalities. But if we were able to give them 2 or 3 games in the morning, instead of one long match, 2 or 3 shorter matches against different opponents, that gives them different opportunities. Because if you lose your game on a Saturday, you can't do anything about it until you train again Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, whatever it is. But if we get 3 games in a row, we can go over things again. It's more opportunities for learning in a more developmentally appropriate environment. And something that we do in England, which I think is really weird how it's not done in the US, it's not done in Mexico, is our leagues have specific times on when kids play. So you join a Saturday morning league or you join a Sunday afternoon league and you play your games then. Whereas here and in the States, it's at all different times. You can get kids playing at 8 o'clock on a Sunday on a school night, and then they can play again on a Wednesday. And you got parents who got 3 or 4 kids. They're driving all over the state trying to get to all these different matches. And I think it'd be a lot better for the families if the times and the schedule were just more consistent. Let's say under 10s are going to play at 9 on a Saturday. So that under 11s are going to play at 10:30 on a Saturday, and just keep it consistent like that. They can plan much better. And I think that helps the kids grow holistically in that they're able to get a bit more done. They're able to have a bit more structure in their lives. And I think it definitely helps the parents. I mean, I can't imagine what it must be like to work hard, 9 to 5 all week, and then get to the weekend, know that you've got to wake up early on a Saturday morning to drive one kid to that location, your other kid to that location, and be all over the place. And let's help them out a bit. Let's do our best to try and help these families be able to plan their lives better.
When you are kind of thinking through all these different changes, and they're changes just because it's different than what you're seeing, right? It's when you're looking at this, how important is it to you to keep the length of matches, the frequency of matches, the size of the field, the size of the ball, all of that relative to focus on development and skill rather than on physical play? you mentioned at the start of this interview about your upbringing and the fact that your playing career as a youth player was one that was built around bigger, faster, stronger. How much of what you're looking at in terms of the field size, the ball size, the length of matches, the breaks in matches, the size of the field in general, how many, are on a side playing 7v7, 9v9, etc. How much of that for you is based around this philosophy of, I want to make sure that we're creating environments to develop players who are technically and skillfully better, rather than just creating environments for the bigger, the faster, the stronger to flourish?
So the kid and their experience has to be at the center of everything we do. It's that question that Marco Sullivan asks, because I read a lot of his stuff and a lot of the talent equation, a lot of the constraints-led approach. I'm really into that kind of thing. And it's when they say, if you were to redesign the way that your sport, your club, your federation does, let's say, so if we were to redesign the way the USSF does football, and if they were to put the child and their experience at the heart of everything they do, would the system look the same as it does now? And so that's what I'm trying to do.
The answer is no, just for anyone listening. The answer is no. It would not look the same.
So this is just me essentially jotting some thoughts down. Like if I was put in charge, if I was given that responsibility, this is how I think I would do it based on what I've seen and what I've read and what I've experienced, where a lot of these are constraints and parameters and things like that, which help shape the learning. So when, for me growing up, if the pitch is shorter, then I have less time and space, and my smashing the ball 60 yards upfield doesn't work. My thoughtless kick has to become a thoughtful pass. I'd be under pressure. I wouldn't be able to just release the ball. And so a lot of it comes down to that. I mean, I think the vast majority of what you hear on the sidelines in the United States is just emotional nonsense with no specific use. There's no real instruction to it. And one of the things that we did when we first got to Missouri is we started to write down just the nonsense we'd hear, and we tried making memes out of it. And we'd say to kids, do you know what this actually means? Right? When you're being told to hustle, get there, go through and find feet, what does it mean to you? Oh, I don't know, just I'll kick the ball that way and hope it's right. So if we were to break the game into thirds or periods, you get a bit more time to actually have useful discussion with your kids, rather than being some idiot on the sidelines who sees the game getting away from them, just getting too emotional, shouting stuff. You'd actually be able to pull them in, a bit like when you have the interventions in practice, when you get the team in, you have a team discussion. And I think that would help reduce a lot of what you hear, all that nonsense on the sideline. Definitely the size of the pitch would help. Like when you see the indoor, the 6v6 American game played on usually the converted ice hockey rinks, that for me is massive. That's about 2 times the size it needs to be, because you think if we're going to play smaller sided, then the game becomes a lot more technical. But if you make the pitch as long as those 6v6 ones are, you can still essentially play long ball. So that kind of defeats the purpose of it. So a lot of the 5v5 leagues in England are about 20 to 25 yards wide and 30 to 40 yards long. And in most of them, you can't play the ball above head height. And some of them, you can't play the ball above board height. So that's about 4 feet in the air. So that means we have to actually think and use solutions, find solutions to the problems. I've got no one to pass to, so I need to turn, shield, dribble. I need to instruct my teammates to find an angle. Or if you're the player off the ball, how do you help the player on the ball, rather than just using your brute force and using that one weapon of I'm going to kick it in behind, and I'm going to run after it, and I'm going to fight everyone. And I said before, that really helped me develop my game to be able to play in those type of environments. And another thing, which I don't know if many people in the United States see it as a big deal, but you probably agree that referees' standard is quite bad. And every state I've been to, they claim to have the worst referees in the country. And I think referees are kind of shortchanged, and that's a whole different discussion. I don't think the support and the education is there to help them, and essentially we're taking just anyone. But do we need to have 3 referees at every game in US youth leagues? And a lot of people would say, yeah, because parents and coaches don't know what they're doing, and because the youth sport environment is so hostile, you have to have someone neutral. You couldn't have a parent be the linesman. Whereas in other countries, that's what we do. And it's kind of counterintuitive, but you find that when you use a club volunteer or someone's mum or dad or someone's older sibling, when they run the line, it's someone you know, so they get less abuse. It's happened to all of us playing LMB11 in England. It's a linesman doesn't turn up and one of the subs has to do it. And maybe their performance isn't as good as a neutral official would be. But it's less hostile when you can't shout that the throw-in went the wrong way because that guy is your ride home or it's your mate's dad. Everything seems to calm down a lot more, because I think a lot of people forget that referees are actually people too. And it's a bit like when you're a kid seeing your teacher at the supermarket. I didn't know you were real. I thought you slept at your desk. I thought you spent the night in the school. And just to get more people involved in that process, I think we come together better as a community. Because definitely the sentiment in the United States is very much me first, my kid ahead of yours. And the big difference in most other footballing countries is that our shared national ambition, and I might be speaking on behalf of too many people here, but our shared national ambition is that our country wins the World Cup. And so to some extent, we're all in this together. Whereas for most American parents who weren't brought up loving football in the same way we do, their identity isn't tied into the game in the same way that ours is. So the only real investment they have emotionally is the well-being and the success of their kid. And so the be all and end all is to get them into college. And so they believe in order to do that, you have to win, you've got to perform now. And take a step back and realize that you're a very small cog in a massive, massive system, and that we're all in this together. And for me, and I don't know if other coaches feel the same way, but if I found out, 20, 30 years that one of the players at the World Cup or the Champions League was someone that I coached against when I was, when they were younger. So let's say that there's some 10-year-old now in Missouri who in 30 years scores a goal in the World Cup, the United States, and I coached a team against them. I've contributed to that in a small way. I have contributed to that, and we all do it. We're all part of this. And if someone from your area, from your club, from your school goes on to achieve success, you were part of that. Because it takes a village to raise a child. Now, I don't think many in the US see that. And so that idea of contributing, that idea of shared success isn't there. And so it becomes just a lot more selfish, a lot more me first. So some of what I would try and implement would look to try and break some of that stuff. Look to try and just develop that culture a bit better.
Well, I love your thoughts, and I love where you're at, and I love the stuff that you have in your blog, unorthodoxcoaching.blogspot.com. If you want to read more of those comments, like this line: the sadist in me finds the sheer panic in the days before a tournament when there's bad weather projected so thoroughly enjoyable. You can get a nice read at the website there, the blog as well, unorthodoxcoaching.blogspot.com. How can people connect with you outside of your blog, maybe on Twitter, to maybe pick your brain, gather your thoughts, etc.?
Yeah, Twitter and LinkedIn are the best ways to find me. On LinkedIn, I think you'll find Will Wilson Football. On Twitter, you'll get me at Coach Willie 1875. I've got nothing to do for the next month and a half, so I'm open to plenty of discussion. I've already got quite a few people picking my brain. They keep me busy, they keep me entertained, so I'm happy to talk to anyone about anything, and I'm so open to be proven wrong. So if you look at some of my ideas and think they're completely stupid, please tell me, because either I'm going to learn something or I'm going to reinforce and consolidate what I already know. I definitely think we need more open discussion and more open debate, and that's why I put a lot of my stuff out there. Come and have a look. This might be of use to you, or maybe you know more than I do, and so your comments are going to help me.
I love it, and I want to have you back on again soon to get into some more of this, because I love where your head's at on this stuff, and really diving into some of the things that are plaguing youth soccer and how we can do it better. So, Will, thanks for joining the show today. We really appreciate it, and look forward to having you back on again soon.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm happy to come back on anytime. Always happy to talk football, so thank you for having me.
Thank you. That is Will Wilson, and appreciate his thoughts. You can catch more at unorthodoxcoaching.blogspot.com. We'll be right back after this.
No one, no man, no woman, no child should ever have to drink green water with bugs, with algae, with disease in it. Bad water and a lack of toilets kills more people than all the wars in the world. We know how to bring clean drinking water right now to every single person on earth. And when you can bring water into communities, it truly transforms them. It changes everything. Or you could know that you'd made a difference. You could know that you had truly impacted the life of a family, of a community, of a region. There was either clean water or there wasn't. We believe in a world where every single person has clean and safe water to drink, and we will continue fighting until that happens.
Welcome back to the show. Thanks for tuning in today. As always, appreciate Will joining the show. Coach Willie 1875 on Twitter, as always. And look, thanks for watching the show, as always. Facebook.com/WRKMN at Daniel Workman. Watch on VegaTV.com. It's a digital soccer channel project that we're still building out, and appreciate the support there. And look, we've got to do better in this country, and it starts with the federation, and everyone, all eyes need to be squarely focused on them. We've got to fix this stuff, and we've got to get it right. Thanks for watching the show. We'll see everyone again tomorrow.